Sawadee Krap and welcome back to the channel and back to the teaching segment, the higher education segment of the Funkit Pod. And I thought, in preparation also for the new semester and everything, I'm going to start something new. I'm going to try to share some teaching approaches, methods, and maybe we can talk about it and maybe you can actually take something away from it. And maybe you can give me some feedback and say, hey, you could enhance it in this and that way. Maybe it's just a learning for all of us in there. I just did a guest lecture during a summer program, and the feedback I've gotten, which was half to be expected, but still nice to hear, was like, oh my God, your lectures are so engaging, so active, and so on. And most professors aren't like this. And I don't mean to mention this to put me on a pedestal or anything. I think it's quite normal, but that made me realize that maybe lots of people, especially in higher education, lots of teachers, lecturers, professors, it's just don't spend that much time on it because there's so many other things you have to do. You have to do like all your research, you have to hit your KPIs and so on. So it's hard to also focus on teaching methods. So I thought maybe a 10, 15-minute video here and there can help to just think about a few things. Okay, and that's why I don't mean to be talking down on anything. I just mean to share a few ideas and maybe we can talk about it and maybe that just helps a little bit. Okay, so in this segment of my channel, of the Funkit Pod, I'm going to talk about teaching approaches and so on in higher education in order to make classes more interactive, more engaging, and so on. So in this first episode, if you will, I'm going to talk a little bit about active learning, how to get your classes to be a bit more active, and kind of highlight just now in the intro why it's essential. Okay, then I'm going to have a few specific active learning strategies for you. I'm going to talk about just a few examples, like a few famous ones that you can also easily Google once you heard them. So for example, there's an approach called think, pair, share, for example. We have a very famous one that most people are using to some extent, which is problem-based learning, PBL. And then, of course, what also lots of lectures already do is like the flipped classroom, right? So I'm going to start with the familiar ones and then hopefully eventually dive and delve into a few more unfamiliar ones. If you understand those, then we can use them, of course, and then we can also maybe talk about tips and tricks and so on, how to make it better. Okay, in the end, I'm going to have a quick summary, and then we move on to the next point in the next episode. So I'm going to start with that think, pair, share thing, right? So the think, pair, share, if you're not familiar, let me just quickly explain it. That starts with like posing a question or like a problem or something to the class, and then you have some individual thinking time, okay? Students then, they pair up, think, pair, share, they pair up to discuss their thoughts and ideas. Then afterwards, lastly, those pairs, they share their insights with the whole class, okay? This technique is quite helpful when it comes to fostering critical thinking, I believe. But also, and I'm always a big fan of like those hidden learning outcomes, right? Like one of my favorite inspirations was like Randy Pausch. And he always talked about head fake learning. It was a term he used a lot, like head fake learning. He's like, you're doing one thing, and while you're doing one thing, you learn something else. And in this case, while you're sharing your opinions on the topic, you're learning how to communicate. So it clearly enhances communication skills, and I think that's very important, especially these days, because communication skills, let's be honest, have deteriorated. Right? Not only among students, among ourselves as well, but so with exercises like this, we can hopefully foster them again, okay? Because it encourages students to articulate their thoughts clearly. And the better you are at articulating your thoughts, the better you can make your point, right? Okay. The next one that I mentioned in the intro was PBL, problem-based learning. Most of you will be familiar with this, which is fantastic. So just so that you're on the same page, right? In PBL, students are presented with a problem that doesn't have a fixed answer, right? So this problem then is basically what we want to call like a catalyst for learning, right? For instance, in a geography, let's talk about geography because I want to use something that is not my wheelhouse. So geography. Students might be given a task to devise a waste management plan. Yeah, that makes sense. A waste management plan for a city. And then while they research and brainstorm about solutions, they learn and apply also the geographical concepts. Okay. And so this leads to the whole learning experience being more relevant and more impactful. So they're looking for this one solution And on the way to find that solution, they're learning more about, in this case, geographical concepts, for example. Okay, so giving someone a specific problem, it gives them some kind of like a goal that they want to achieve, right? And if I have this goal, then I work towards the goal. And while I work towards the goal, I learn many other things that lead me to achieve that goal, all right? The last thing that I mentioned in the intro was the flipped classroom. And it was a buzzword thing for a while. And I still think it's still interesting. Yeah, this strategy, as you might know, flips the traditional teaching model, right? That's why the flipped classroom. So students will review the lecture materials at home and then spend the class time working on what would typically be assigned as their homework. This makes the class more interactive because it leads to clearer understanding because they can ask you questions right away and you can give them feedback right away. It's like more like a one-on-one help, if you will. And also it's more like it has a more immediate application of the learned concept, right? So I learned it at home. Hopefully I studied it at home. Then I try to apply it. And if I run into problems applying it, my teacher, lecturer, professor is there to give me immediate feedback, to help me with it. Okay. So I think while this is not groundbreaking news here in the first episode, we will hopefully find a few more techniques that are more new to you. But I still think like just thinking about those, hopefully, makes us go like, oh yeah, maybe I can try it. Maybe I can just do like a flipped class, for example. Right? So if you consider that, or if you think about like a real life example, like there's a professor, you, me, whoever that might be, who just implements that flipped classroom model in let's use the most hated class I ever had, in a calculus course, right? And if anyone's teaching calculus, you are very important. I was just never good at it, but you're very important. So they would upload a lecture video, for example. It's also how I've used flipped classrooms. I don't just post my PDFs. I usually have explanatory videos, short videos, like this one, to make them understand it a little bit better. So you could upload a lecture video, for example. You could upload an instructional video. And we talk more about how to create engaging videos down the road. And so the students can review those videos before class. And then during class, students work on the problems that you give them, that you posted them, while you as a professor, you provide guidance, okay? As a result, hopefully, students then would report improved comprehension of what is actually a very complex topic, as I can attest to. Hopefully, this leads to increased confidence because they now know how to use it, how to apply it, and eventually will hopefully have a more enjoyable learning experience because they feel like, hey, I actually understood it now. Okay, so that could be like a benefit of the flipped classroom. If you look at how to actually integrate that, right? How to integrate those active learning strategies into teaching. I think it's helpful if you start like small. Don't think of like, I have to change my whole syllabus. Yes, start small. You could, for example, what we said today, that think, pair, share thing, right? It's very easy to implement. You can do that at the beginning of a class, just do the think, pair, share. Like, hey, if you have like a class on, I don't know, commerce, on media or whatever, you're like, hey, Mark Zuckerberg just launched Threads. Here's a think, pair, share prompt. Let's do it. And then you just do it for like 10 minutes or so. Or you could just have like a small problem-based learning task in like a single classroom setting. You don't have to change your whole syllabus all at once. And then once you're getting more confident, you can gradually increase the use of those strategies. And then you can flip your whole class if you want to, for example. But you don't need to start like big in the beginning. Start like small, one step here, one step there. See how students react to that, and then maybe make it bigger, more, and so on. What's very important, but I also learned a hard lesson on that. That's why I have it in my notes, is communication. Communication is super important, yeah? Because if you try something new in class, students might be uneasy with that in the beginning. They're like, what's happening? Why is it different? I'm just used to sitting here and maybe taking notes. I'm just used to sitting here. So you got to set clear expectations. You have to explain the structure somehow and the purpose of the activity. Usually once I explain the purpose of the activity, and very often I do it before the class happens. I do this via our LMS, right? So I'm like, hey, we're going to have like a different kind of class. The purpose is, please be on time. And then we just start, for example. Okay, so purpose really, really helps here. Also, what I found very important is the reinforcing of that it's okay to make mistakes. The mistakes are part of the learning process. So I always tell the students, hey, if you made a mistake, if something isn't working out, that's perfect because you're still learning something. So if students are aware of that, then maybe they appreciate that new style a little bit more because they're not looking for what's wrong, what's right, or like the lecture has to be like that. Maybe they're like more open-minded when you set those expectations and when you communicate clearly. Also, feedback is important. And I mean, the feedback that you give to the students, but also to invite student feedback. Because the feedback you get from students will give you valuable insights as to what worked and what didn't work. And it will tell you how you can refine your approach. And I think if you're communicating well, the students will also give you decent feedback. It's not like, I didn't like it. They will tell you what they liked about it, what they didn't like about it, and so on. The feedback I got in my first flipped class, for example, was that students said for the first few minutes, they didn't really know how to start. Because I thought, hey, you figure it out. I'm just here, but first you figure it out by yourself. And then they're like, but how do we figure it? So the feedback was a little bit more guidance in the beginning would be good. And then just let them run and let them struggle a little bit on themselves. It's okay. But in the beginning, just a bit of guidance would be more helpful. So, open the feedback channel and get some student feedback. That's very, very important to actually improve, in my opinion. And I know we don't always want to listen to students because we're like, hey, I know better what works. And that's how I learned it. But as everyone's changing, right? So be open-minded when it comes to feedback. Also important, right? So in this active learning, it's like the transition for the instructor, for the teacher, right? You're not and there's this saying, and I hate it, but you know the saying, the sage on stage. God, I hate this. And now you're more like, I keep using it now, but you've read it on all the educational blogs. The sage on stage moves to the guide on the guide on the side, but it's just the case. It's just how it is, right? So you're more there to be the guide, be helpful, and you don't need to be like the entertainer on stage anymore. Pardon me. So if you use a variety of active learning strategies, right, they will also help students with diverse learning styles to actually get something from it, because not everybody can just sit down and listen for like an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. And this will also lead to more engagement. Okay. And now I'm hesitating because now the downside is that if you're honest, active learning requires way more upfront planning as well. You cannot just rely on, I've got my 10-year-old presentation here and I'm just going to run through it. You really need to plan a lot. There's way more planning involved than in traditional lectures. And this includes like developing problems or activities that you wanna give to students. You have to think through potential student responses. Like how will they reply? What will I say to it? How will I react to it? And so on. And that's lots of time investment there. However, if you really care about your students, which I hope you do because you're listening/watching this video, in return it will result in deeper student understanding and more engagement. And that's what we want, right? Last point that I make here before I sum things up for the first video is don't forget that technology can be a valuable ally. So you don't need to tell your students, hey, don't use your phones, for example, right? You can use online discussion forums before. You can have digital pollings. You can have live pollings in classes, like Poll Everywhere, for example. You can have live polls in class. So if you have a bigger class where you try this, you can have like the poll on the screen. You're like, hey, right now, answer this question on the screen. And you can use their phones to answer the question, for example. Okay, you can have shared documents, of course. So all those things can obviously enrich this active learning, right? And it will make it more dynamic, more collaborative. So embrace technology. Don't ban it from your classroom, but more on technology as we move on into the next episodes. Okay, I'm going to wrap this first episode up because, like I said, it's just the intro episode and we will go deeper into more details and so on as we move on. But in the last few minutes, we talked about the landscape of active learning, the benefits. We talked about that the benefits might be enhanced comprehension, higher retention, student engagement. We also talked about some 3 basic activities of active learning, which are think, pair, share, problem-based learning, PBL, and then the flipped classroom. Each of them provides like a different, unique approach to foster more interactive, more impactful learning. I, again, assume that this is nothing crazy new for you, maybe just a reminder, just some inspiration to think about it. As we move on into the next episodes, I will hopefully be able to share a few more newer things. Okay, so now, of course, it's your turn, right? Bring this active learning into your classroom. And it's really important to experiment with that. That's something that I learned when I took a class in as the innovative teaching scholars that I was luckily a part of. So shout out to ITS, to Stanford University and the Thailand Research Consortium for really pushing that. They always told us, like, you got to experiment. And experiments are great. When it comes to experimenting, it's just important that you keep track of what's happening. Okay? So you're preparing your class, then you're experimenting in class, and then you also need to think about what happened, why did it happen, how can I improve upon that? So that's very important, just with every other experiment. Okay? So experiment. And then ideally, and that's also what we learn in that program, is that sharing your experiences really matters. Don't just keep it to yourself, because if you share it with your colleagues, with me here, with us here, right? Then you get some different feedback. You get some answers to, like, why did this happen? Oh, this happened to me too. And then I did this and then it changed again. So share your experiences, share the challenges, share what worked, share what didn't work. Yeah, the victories, the losses, the fails, if you want to. Share it in the comments, send an email, funkitpod@gmail.com. And I'll happily discuss it with you, because I think that's very fascinating. Yeah, and all those insights hopefully gonna contribute to like a growing community here of educators that share all their input, their insights, their learnings, and so on. All right, so if you found this video helpful, which I hope you did, then do share it. Press the like button; it would be awesome. Subscribe, and because I really would like to foster this like growing community of educators where we share experiences and then learn from each other. Because that was really the best thing about the program that I mentioned. And I would just like to really grow this and have like just a big happy family of educators that share their best practices. It would be fantastic. All right. I'll try to post some links to related content, to sources in the video description, of course, so you can check them out there. That's it for now. Coming back soon. If you have any questions, shout out. I'll try to answer them, of course. Until then, stay safe, take care, and we talk hopefully very soon. Sawadee ka.